Hi there, folks! As I'm sure many of you know, the trailer for Jurassic World Rebirth was published on Wednesday. I was originally just going to make a few posts on a few of my socials sharing my thoughts that day, but since a few people asked if I was going to make a video on it, I decided to take a break from studying Mastodon for next month's episode to share excitement for what I think looks like it will be a pretty good, or at least enjoyable, next installment in the franchise. Jurassic World Rebirth takes place 5 years after the events of Dominion. Well, in that film, dinosaurs achieved what seemed like near global distribution through migration and trafficking. The world has largely proven inhospitable to them, and they are now generally restricted to the remote tropics. Covert operative Zora Bennett, played by Scarlett Johansson, is hired to join paleontologist Dr. Henry Loomis, played by Jonathan Bailey, and team leader Duncan Kincaid, played by Mahershala Ali, to collect samples from several large animals at the behest of pharmaceutical representative Martin Krebs. Their target is one of the islands where InGen first bred a lot of their dinosaurs. This mission sees them cross paths with a civilian family, and presumably following an attack by Spinosaurs and a Mosasaur, the team and family are stranded together on the island. First off, I want to say that I like what I've seen from the cast. They appear to have good chemistry, and I left the trailer wanting to see more of them and spend time with them. Yes, we watch these movies for dinosaurs, but human characters are who we spend most of our time with. Them being engaging and fun will definitely elevate the experience. I've seen people complain the dialogue has Marvel quippiness to it, but I didn't really notice it, and certainly didn't bother me. It's a trailer. The dialogue is meant to show what the characters are there for, who they are, and catch our attention. The scenes with high tension don't appear to be broken by that sort of thing. We'll judge when the film comes out, but I'm optimistic about a lot of things, with the characters being pretty high on the list. While this line about the world being inhospitable to dinosaurs has gotten a fair bit of frustration and disagreement among some fans, I think it makes a lot of sense. Not only was the Mesozoic ranging from a bit warmer to unspeakably hotter than it is today, they were also genetically engineered to thrive on a tropical island. Yes, some of them may do for a few years in the cold, but in the case of sauropods, for example, their body size trapping and maintaining heat produced by endothermic metabolisms doesn't change the fact that their reproduction is reliant on their eggs not being frozen during their 3 to 6 month incubation. Even if they could endure colder temperatures than they were engineered for, maintaining a population in these conditions might just be out of the question. Sure, winter may have killed some of the dinosaurs, but I imagine it's just as likely to be a case of them making their own way to climates closer to what they either evolved in or were engineered for. This film takes place mainly on an island InGen used to make some of their earliest dinosaurs. While we're more familiar with Sorna as Site B, where many of the dinosaurs were engineered, bred, and raised, this was apparently a research facility where some of their earliest specimens were made. The impression I got was that this site was more or less abandoned prior to the events of Jurassic Park. We'll see in the film how much lore is explored. I can't say I'm terribly familiar with the franchise lore, so won't weigh in too much on continuity and canon, but the idea that InGen had one of their many islands dedicated to initial study, where a lot of them went wrong, makes some sense to me. Now we get to the meat of why I'm sure a lot of you watch these films and videos reacting to them: the dinosaurs. The first film in the franchise, Jurassic Park, goes through great lengths to depict the dinosaurs as accurately as possible. As I understand it, there was even possible discussion about feathering their depiction of Deinonychus, or Velociraptor per Crichton, following Paul's lumping of the taxon in his influential book Predatory Dinosaurs of the World, though for technical reasons, or perhaps not being sufficiently intimidating, the idea was scrapped. That does speak to that when the designs of Jurassic Park deviated from available evidence or likely anatomy, it was done for technical or narrative reasons. The default was a scientifically informed depiction. However, science marches on. In the 3 decades since this first film, we have made countless more discoveries and studies that have greatly improved our understanding of these animals. Yet, when Jurassic World debuted, many of the designs appeared as they were in films past, or in some cases like the Stegosaurus, seem to have even regressed. I've heard it said that this was in-universe a decision by the corporation to maintain the brand, but it always rang a little hollow for me. It's not like the public in the Jurassic universe knew of and loved their raptors without feathers. The herbivores being dopey and lethargic does make some sense for animals raised in a petting zoo and conditioned to be around humans and the gyrospheres as adults. Fine, but on a personal level, I was a bit disappointed that the Jurassic World trilogy generally seemed to have the design ethos more referential to films in the past than to specimens on which they should be derived. For my mixed feelings on Dominion, this approach did get some improvements and a few characters which I appreciate, but it still largely had underwhelming designs. We got a lot of new designs in the Rebirth trailer. Not all of them could be described as scientifically informed, but I'll hand it to the designers. It's fresh. They aren't reliant on designs past as a creative crutch. I may not like all of the designs and choices behind them, but in a media landscape so dominated by nostalgia bait, I can't help but appreciate taking some risks. I know there are leaks out there of some dinosaurs we saw and some we didn't, but as I feel it'd be disrespectful to the creators in discussing them if they weren't debuted in the trailer, I'll not weigh in on that too much. I do understand fans who are disappointed that the appearance and coloration of some animals goes against film canon. This is not a new phenomenon, which, for example, the stark difference between raptors in the original trilogy. I personally justified some of this with my own headcanon, with the idea that pigs can sometimes be quite similar to wild boar in only a few generations in the wild, so perhaps the JP3 raptors are the wild morph of the GMO domesticates of the first film. I'd rather this result be them being feathered, but whatever, that's just me. I like the new Spinosaurs having an updated look, more along that in a moment though, but maintaining some elements of at least the coloration may have been a better play for the sake of continuity. I like them trying to be fresh and personally like what I'm seeing, but understand why fans who want a consistent canon are frustrated by some choices. An updated Spinosaurus and anatomy, while maintaining at least some color elements, may have been a better compromise, but this is the choice they made, and I'll withhold too much judgment and critique until we see them in action. There have been some fun theories going around that inform some of these designs. A lot of them stem from interviews saying the site had a lot of dinosaurs the park creators didn't like or thought wouldn't fit well in the park. My favorite fan theory was by Twitter user T-Rexcellent that said some of these failed experiments may well have actually been fairly accurately and authentically cloned, just looked so different from what was anticipated that they were set aside. After all, in some cases at least the book, dinosaurs were cloned from fossils, but many were made from blood preserved in mosquitoes. Chances are many of these first attempts were quite messy and fragmentary. Maybe they thought Spinosaurs looked the way it did because they incorporated too much frog or salamander in the wrong place and discarded them, not knowing that's what fossils would support as accurate decades later. I think I'm most intrigued by the Titanosaurus. Our knowledge of this animal is generally based on very fragmentary remains, so while it made sense for a finned, oversized, fat-faced dinosaur may have been passed over in the park in favor of a more simple and majestic Brachiosaurus, I don't think what we saw of these animals in the trailer contradicts any available evidence. Maybe some species had long tails and display fans. Perhaps it's influenced from some lizard that was incorporated into their genome. Who knows? It looks to me like this sequence is going to lean into wonder and amazement. I hear people don't want the trope of herbivores being peaceful dummies being perpetuated, and it sure does seem like this trailer presents a very predator-heavy island, but I wouldn't levy too much critique in this department until we see the movie. Theropods put butts in seats, and butts in seats generate enthusiasm and funds for paleontology programs. Them's the digs. I'm a bit skeptical that the dinosaurs that were, according to a lot of the marketing, too dangerous to be in the park. Ugly, not consistent with what they wanted, or impractical to house perhaps, but aside from the rancor that, yeah, I'll get to that, I don't think that any of what we see is too dangerous for the park. They may want to just drum up interest and hype. These monsters are big and scary. That's the entire point of marketing. Fair enough. Doesn't really take me out of it now, but I admit it did make my eyes roll a bit at first. I prefer the marketing of Jurassic Park hyping the science, informing the designs, maybe pushing that these are animals, not monsters, but whatever. Again, put butts in seats. Make $1 billion and paleontology will be better funded for it. The Ashdarkid sequence looks very exciting. I admit I don't love the beak shape personally, especially since Dominion already gave us a banger Quetzalcoatlus, but this is all subjective opinion, and if they are trying to make these animals that seem like they aren't up to the quality that they wanted to present in the parks, fair enough. The vibes are great, and it looks like this will be a thrilling sequence. We've not seen much of the raptors. I still hold hope that they will be feathered. I think that could fit very well into what we have just discussed. Raptors with feathers may have contradicted what the park wanted to present. They wanted dinosaurs, not what may have been mistaken for monstrous hybrid birds by park goers, though there were plenty of depictions of dinosaurs with feathers at the time, including Paul's illustration of Deinonychus in the book that most influenced how Crichton depicted them, so maybe that explanation wouldn't land. Who knows? I think the time to introduce feathered raptors was in Jurassic Park 3, and if not then, in the first Jurassic World. We got them in Dominion, and hope they're here to stay in Rebirth. It's a big part of their brand, though. I won't hold my breath for it. The new T-Rex character looks gorgeous. Don't have much but praise and excitement for what we're shown here. Artists did a fantastic job with what they were given, and this is, I think, a great example of that. Again, seems like a very fun segment we're setting up with this sequence. My thoughts are the same with the Mosasaur. It looks stunning. I know a few folks who study these animals have expressed some nitpicks with the designs, but overall it's a much more faithful depiction of the animal than films past. Mosasaurus in the previous films was a fine addition in broad strokes and put this animal in the minds of casual fans, so for that it was a nice inclusion, but being both a bit of a pedant dweeb and thinking more scientifically informed designs tend to just look better, it never really landed for me. On a personal level, I much prefer this new Mosasaurus. It looks like an enormous, beautiful, hateful sea monster. What more could you want? Alright, now we're going to get to the source of some controversy. And no, I'm not talking about the Rancor, we'll get there. For now, I'm talking about Mr. Habsburg. Spinosaurus. In broad strokes, I'm excited. Aligning what we think the real animal may have looked like in a memorable and engaging sequence, I think is going to be a great move. This is not what I personally think is likely for their aquatic behavior. See the Kurajaku for what I, an amateur with no paleo credentials, think Spinosaurus was probably doing in the water. However, from a purely self-serving angle, I don't mind that them showing Spinosaurus as a fast-swimming surface predator and letting me debut the hippo analog Spinosaurus. Having them cooperate with the Mosasaurus is cool. No, interspecies cooperation like this isn't common and doesn't make a whole lot of sense for animals separated by over 10 million years and needing as much food as these enormous and likely aggressive warm-blooded predators would, but it doesn't really bother me, at least from what we've seen. Looks like it'll be fun. The overall anatomy is solid from what I've seen. Generally speaking, like the rest of the design, I think the artists involved did a fantastic job bringing these animals to life. The film is going to make or break one aspect for me, though, the head and neck. Skulls have a lot of issues more qualified individuals than I have rightfully critiqued. It's not great. Unfortunate, because the skull material we do have is a pretty hardcore looking animal. The one close-up we do get shows an animal with a fairly short neck compared to the usual reconstructions, and the head is wide and misshapen. I was under the impression that it was a more common trend for secondarily aquatic tetrapods to evolve short necks, and so perhaps speculating that this very aquatic interpretation of Spinosaurus might evolve a short neck as well, but Dr. Hartman took me to school on that one, so maybe it's not that plausible after all. Stocky and a few others have floated that maybe this is just a fat or funky individual, and I guess some shots imply that others may have more conventional proportions. I've not done detective work, so I can't speak to that validity, but it does speak to what I think would be an interesting way to further explain some of the wonky anatomy we see. Yes, some of it may result from the messy GMO creations. I think there might be something else at play, though. Something that has fairly bleak implications for dinosaurs in the franchise. Inbreeding. This island was, to my understanding, a site worked long before the park was close to being ready for operations. Perhaps a decade or more. That means some of these animals may have been establishing their own populations for several decades. If their starting population was what, maybe a few animals with some of them reproducing via unintended parthenogenesis, then they are really working with a healthy gene pool. I'm not saying that the Spinosaurus with a short neck is definitely the result of a condition derived through inbreeding, but I'd prefer that and the other two having more conventional proportions. Would certainly be an issue that the mainland dinosaurs would also have to contend with. Many species, including our own, bounced back after severe population bottlenecks, so it's not prohibitive to survival, but too small a population could be another way for the designers to make some interesting character designs that look quite distinct from the fossil record, even without the incorporation of DNA from other species. Who knows? I may be way overthinking this. Just letting my mind wander a bit here. Alright, we gotta address the rancor in the room. I don't have a whole lot to say here. It's not the direction I would go, or even have it in, and it's not the decision I would have made if I wanted to show a horrible monster blending different dinosaurs and a frog or whatever. Also hearing that this may have been the first attempt at replicating a T-Rex, which... sure. In their episode on the Indominus Rex, the Skeleton Crew talked a fair bit about how the hybrids in Jurassic World may have been better implemented. A proposal they made quite resonated with me, which is that the presentation of these hybrid genetic monsters as a more sympathetic character, I think would have landed a lot better, and something I hope they explore in this film. I think how it is executed in the films is going to be a deciding factor if it lands for me or not. For now, I have no strong opinions. I know I should probably be tearing it apart or singing its praises for the thumbnail, but I really think the execution is going to be the deciding factor. And that's kind of my general thoughts for all the designs in this film. I vastly prefer accurate designs, and I think they do a better job both warming the public up to scientifically informed approaches, and also just sticks better to the ethos of the first film. The illusion of control was a big theme in that one and in the book, and if you don't have scientifically informed designs, if you're just making monsters, then that doesn't contribute to the illusion of control. That said, there's a lot of gaps in our knowledge and understanding, and I think it's fair to say that you should fill these gaps, and in doing so, you can get quite creative and cool with the process. Don't be inconsistent with available evidence, and be cool and creative when the option is available, but generally speaking, I prefer when they err on the side of accurate designs. At the end of the day, though, accurate dinosaur designs won't fix a bad movie, and inaccurate designs won't break a good movie. I hope we get a good movie, and from what I've seen and heard, I have sound basis for optimism. My thoughts on the previous 3 movies are mixed. I am more hopeful that I'll like the human characters in this one, and I have a lot of what I'm seeing in the dinosaur designs and the scenes we catch a glimpse of. Maybe I'll be wrong. I don't care. I think we should all indulge a little optimism in times like these. I think this is going to be good, and that's where I'm setting up my camp. Anyway, back to studying for me. Hope you all had a great weekend. Cheers, folks!